Question number 2 in the name of Deputy John Brady. The Deputy has 30 seconds to introduce the question.
Thanks, Gahir. Look, Minister, you may be aware that last year, as like most years, Barnardo's carry out their annual back-to-school cost survey, which found that the cost of sending one child to primary school had risen to €390 and the cost of sending one child to secondary school had risen to €785. Minister, the current rates of payment under the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance does not cover the actual costs of sending children back to school. Firstly, are you aware of the survey carried out by Barnardo's on an annual basis, and would you acknowledge that the payment is grossly insufficient to meet the demands? And finally, will you consider increasing the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance?
The Minister has 2 minutes to reply.
The Back-to-School Clothing and Footwear Allowance scheme provides a one-off payment to eligible families to assist with the cost of clothing and footwear when children start or return to the school each autumn. It is not intended to cover the entire cost of going back to school, but rather to give parents a helping hand, and it is not intended to cover items other than clothing and footwear. £38.8 million has been made available for the scheme this year, which is designed to assist people to meet the cost of going back to school. The majority of payments, approximately 109,000 families for 193,000 children, will be paid in the week ending the 15th of July, with no application form required. Customers who have not been notified of an automated payment should make a written application to the Department of Social Protection. The payment rates are €100 for children aged 4 to 11 and €200 for children aged 12 to 22. The survey referred to by the Deputy was undertaken by Barnardo's in 2015, and I am aware of it, and indicated that on average parents pay approximately €100 to €115 for a primary school pupil's uniform and €195 for secondary school. I met Barnardo's yesterday and was one of the items we discussed. The survey also shows that the average cost of shoes is approximately 50 to 55 for primary, this is the Barnardo survey, and 60 for secondary school students. The results showed a reduction in uniform costs between 2014 and 2015, and the survey also found a reduction in footwear costs for primary school children, with these costs static for secondary school children. The figure quoted by the Deputy of almost €800 for secondary school pupils included the cost of school books, for which the Department of Education has a scheme, classroom resources and voluntary contributions. The cost of clothing and footwear amounted to just 1/3 of the overall cost of the 800 mentioned. Any changes to the scheme will, of course, have to be considered in the context of the budget.
Thanks, Minister. And I think it's important to point out that your government, in 2 consecutive budgets, actually cut the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance. And let me remind the Minister that in 2011 it was cut from €200 back to €150, and in a subsequent budget it was cut by another €50, bringing it down to its current level of €100. And parents now, for older children, receive €200 compared to €305 in 2011, and again that was cut in a subsequent budget by a further 50, bringing it down to €250, and it currently, as I outlined, stands at €200. And this is not even considering all the additional costs, some of which you outlined there, Minister, that have to be taken into account in sending school children back. But another major concern facing an awful lot of people and precluding people from actually applying for this is the actual thresholds that have been set. And with the rate of inflation growing on an annual basis, a lot of families now are locked out and find themselves, even if they are marginally over the rates that are set, they cannot apply. So again, can I ask the Minister, will he review those income thresholds with a view of changing them?
Minister.
Yeah, you're correct to say that it was cut twice by the Fine Gael Labour government, of which I was a member. And yes, I will be considering the rules around the scheme and the amounts paid in the context of the budget, but I can't make any commitments on the budget now. But speaking of governments, your own party is a member of a government too, in Northern Ireland, where you've been a government for quite some time. So just in case you don't know, there is a school uniform allowance in Northern Ireland, and the payment is €35.75 or €44 for primary school kids. And for secondary school kids, it's €73 to €78. That's €88 to €95. So the back-to-school allowance in Northern Ireland, where your party is in government for a very long time, is less than half what it is here. So perhaps if there is a border poll in the north, one of the strongest arguments for people to vote for Irish unity is so that they can have a Fine Gael government, in which case they'll do much better than they do under Sinn Féin.
But don't forget the independents.
They would have to actually start acting like an all-Ireland party, which clearly they aren't, and maybe start standing people to contest the elections in the 6 counties, and we'll see how popular or unpopular they actually are up there. But other issues have to be taken into consideration, and I received a phone call from a concerned parent in my own constituency, where their school now have brought in iPads, which is welcome in many regards, but there's huge additional expenses for the families. The cost of iPads and all of the insurance costs, etc., is an additional €700 on those families. And as I outlined, all the additional costs there facing these people. And none of this is taken into consideration. I welcome the fact that the Minister is going to review some of the measures around this, but I think the baseline there, the actual amounts of money being given to the families, which you rightly admit to there, was cut by your own government back at a time, 2010, 2011. Those need to be brought up to appropriate levels, and I think the Minister, you have to acknowledge that the levels now are far too low. They need to be reviewed and brought up to an acceptable standard, and also the income threshold.
Thank you.
Minister, if you would seek to have that reviewed as well.
Thank you. Minister, to reply, please.
Yeah, I don't think anyone doubts the enormous cost of sending a kid to school every year, and that we've no argument about that. And of course, in the context of the budget, as part of the package for children and families, we'll be looking at measures to make it more affordable, whether it's increases in the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance, or maybe more assistance with things like school meals and school book schemes, which arguably could be a bit more targeted. But we'll certainly be looking at that as part of the package for children and families. But as an all-Ireland party, one thing perhaps Sinn Féin could do, and make it a priority for the next couple of years, is to bring welfare rates in Northern Ireland up to the level they are here. That could be one of. Yeah, it's not. It's the cost of living.
The Minister, without interruption, please.
Yeah, I know you don't want to hear this, but you are going to have to hear it. The cost of living in Northern Ireland isn't half what it is here. It may be lower. It's not half. And one thing you can do to prove you're an all-Ireland party is to commit yourselves and your DUP coalition partners to increasing welfare rates to what they are in the Republic of Ireland, rather than doing what you are doing, which is prioritising reducing corporation tax down to what it is here.
Thank you, Minister. Okay. Your question is finished, Deputy.